Stakeholders today. Spotlight Now starts now.
You're watching Spotlight Now with Ryan Kalei-Suchi and Yunji Denise on Hawaii News Now. Have questions or comments for our guests? Join the conversation in our Facebook live stream. Spotlight Now, where Hawaii comes to talk.
Well, aloha for tuning in here to Spotlight Now on this Tuesday. We are going to get to our first guest in just a few moments. But before we begin the conversation with our guest, we always want to invite you into the conversation as well. You can head over to Facebook and insert your question for our guest. We'll be monitoring it throughout the show.
And we have three guests today who are all stakeholders in our state education system. We want to first invite in the superintendent for the Hawaii Department of Education, Mr. Keith Hayashi. Thank you so much for being here today.
Aloha, Yunji.
It's great to see you, and we want to get to the federal impacts that we talked about right off the top. But before we do, your department put out a press release today that we want to ask you about, and that is buses. We know that the school year is winding down, and you're already looking ahead to the fall. So what can you tell us about transportation?
Thanks. We do know that transportation is so important. It's important to get our students to school, but also there is a nationwide bus shortage, bus drivers. And the department is working really hard to be proactive. And so the release today that we'll be sharing with the public is that we're doing all we can to be sure that we're able to fulfill all of our routes. However, there's things that happen beyond our control. We're working really hard with our contractors to be sure that we have those bus drivers. However, in the event that we don't, we want to be sure that there are options. And so what the release today will share is that, we're prioritizing our elementary students and our students with special needs. Those students will be prioritized. Then for our middle school students, there will be options. If parents choose to, there will be an express pass, similar to what the high school students had last year. That's one option. Also, we're doing a pilot on a ridership app that parents might want to be interested in. And that pilot's happening in Kekalike complex on Maui and in the Mililani complex here on Oahu. But we are working really hard to be sure that we can get those drivers in those positions. So if there are any folks out there, listeners that are interested in supporting students, we're looking. I was at doing my grocery shopping, and actually a cashier shared with me that I'm gonna be, this is my last week on the job. I'm gonna be driving school bus. And I said, that's great. And so I asked her, I said, what made you decide to drive a bus? And she said, what way, that's the way that she can contribute to help get students to school. And so again, if there are any folks out there that love kids, want to help with transportation, the Department of Education is looking.
And as you anticipate potential shortages and having to make adjustments, what are the determinations in terms of locations? Are you focusing in on any specific communities that might be able to have this service over the others? How do you make that determination?
Well, definitely we're looking at, as I shared, elementary students and those students with special needs. We also take into consideration distance, availability of transportation in different areas. Those are all things that our transportation office takes into account before making those decisions. What we want to do this year is to be sure that we can let parents know ahead of time, as early as possible, to avoid any kind of confusion and last minute kind of planning. So we are putting that out to parents that those are the options that are available.
Okay, well, let's talk about the school year as it starts to wind down. Hard to believe summer is upon us. How do you feel like things are going right now for Hawaii students?
Definitely there are some bright spots that are happening in the department. There was we're looking at the nation's report card. The Department of Education in Hawaii, we're looking at our fourth grade mathematics, and we have shown, we're one of 15 states across the country that has shown significant gains in our fourth grade mathematics. 2 percentage point increase in each of the last 2 years. And as folks know, that 1 percentage point increase is huge, but so we've had 2 in fourth grade math. Also, there was a study that was done by Harvard University and Stanford University looking at pandemic recovery. And so across the country, Hawaii is number 4 in academic recovery in mathematics and second in academic recovery in reading. And those scores, both of those studies, is a tribute, I think, to the hard work of our teachers, our school principals and administrators, and all staff at the school, complex, and state office. Everyone really pulling together to support our students, including our parents and our kids. So
Where do
promising.
you see some of the more challenging moments right now for where students are at? Is it in this academic progress? Is it through, attendance? Because we know at one point that was another factor with coming out of COVID and just getting students back into the habit of attending school in person, or just overall where things are heading within the department. What are some of the biggest challenges with learning?
Ryan, you're absolutely right. Attendance is huge for us. If students aren't in school, it's really difficult to learn. And so that's something that we've been really working on. Schools have tried different strategies to encourage students to come back to school and to be in school on time every day for the whole day. But we really also count on our parents to encourage kids to come to school, to bring them to school so that they're there. Once we have them in school, our teachers and staff work really hard to support them. But definitely, attendance is huge for us. And so we're continuing to work on that, but it's an all hands on deck, everyone together to help our students. Another area is engagement. Not only getting our students to school, but keeping them engaged, right? Learning is fun, is well connected to different areas, so students can make those connections, to what's happening in life and in their community. So attendance, engagement, definitely two areas that we're focused on.
It's great to hear that we're making these gains, especially post-COVID. Now we have a new administration, and that's part of the reason that we invited you here, because I think there are a lot of questions when the president signed that executive order saying that he wants to dismantle the Department of Education at the federal level. The administration has said basically they're going to cut a check to the states, and then the states can figure out how to spend the money. What would that mean for our system here?
Well, what's happening now is really is very challenging. Definitely, it's some chaotic times. I think, though, for us in the department, we've been working really hard. We've stood up what we're calling a Fed Watch, and so our Fed Watch group meets weekly. They're taking a look at what's happening nationally, taking a look at being connected with our Attorney General's office, the Governor's office, with our congressionals. They've been reaching out to other national organizations, and so we're really aware of kind of what's happening and monitoring. What's happening at the USDOE. We know that the United States Department of Education not only supports us with funding, but also with other areas related to civil rights protections for our students, looking at national standards, many other areas. So definitely impact, but we're fortunate that in Hawaii we have great folks really looking out for our kids in our schools.
With the change of the administration, and with the Trump administration being in office now for 100 days, has there been any changes already within the standards that have been set, whether it be through curriculum that's being out there, any other policies, something beyond just the budget cuts that we're hearing, but have there been any changes that has come down from the administration?
Well, we're continuing to follow federal and state laws. I think we're very focused on ensuring that we're meeting the needs of our students in schools. That's most important. So we've had meetings with our school leaders, with our administrators, and the focus has been, to continue to support our students, continue to support our staff in schools. We're a people organization, and so that's really important. So that's our focus in moving forward.
I'm curious to know, if that. And it's hard to know exactly how this would come to pass, but the idea of them cutting a check and turning over those responsibilities, what kind of an impact would that have? Let's say the money stayed the same, and we're not expecting it to, but let's say it did. What kind of a burden would that place on you and your staff?
I think at that point, should that happen, as far as the department goes, we are prepared to be able to receive funding and to be able to allocate appropriately to our schools and our offices. Again, the U.S. Department of Ed, they provide support not only in funding but in many other areas. But I'm confident that should things like that happen, we're ready and able to be able to continue the work that we're doing in schools to be sure we're meeting the needs of our students and our families.
When you look at just the overall messaging that's coming down. There are obviously is concerned. We've heard it from the congressional delegation specifically about what could be coming to the Department of Education. I'm wondering, how do you plan for these types of things? Because it's going to take some time to adjust. And what we've learned in the past with the Department of Education, it's so large and encompasses the entire state. When something that drastic could happen, how is the department going to be able to adjust? I guess what are some of the things that you're already setting in place, preparing for these types of changes so it doesn't interrupt any academic learning?
And I think for the department, what we've really been focused on is we're able to work cross office, both cross office horizontally as well as vertically from our state complex and schools. We have processes that are in place. I think communication protocols that we're able to address whatever needs. And I think it's really important that we're flexible and we're nimble because we don't know what's going to happen, right? And so to prepare for the unexpected, I think is really important. Communication is really important. I think that we continue to focus on our people, continue the relationships that we've built within the department as well as with our partners and stakeholders. Whatever comes, I think we're ready. We just have to be flexible and we'd be able to react.
I wonder what the policy changes are you expecting any impacts to Hawaiian language immersion schools? Because we know that these fall under public education, but those priorities may not align with the priorities of the new administration. Do you have any concerns in that area?
Most definitely. We haven't seen any of those changes coming down yet, and hopefully they won't. But if they do, Hawaiian language immersion, our Kaipuni schools, definitely important. Building on our culture and supporting our students in those areas. It's important that the host culture, here in Hawaii, that we support them, and all of us, right? And so, but continuing Naho Pena'o across our schools, our immersion programs within schools, definitely important. And we want to be sure that we can continue those efforts.
The state legislature is winding down and budgets are being finalized and crafted, and there's been a number of bills. But I'm wondering if there was any effort done on the state level recognizing that these cuts could be coming, where the state would have to kick in additional funding to help support the needs. We've heard this request from other departments. Have you requested for more money and resources in anticipation of what could be coming down?
Well, we're very fortunate. We're grateful to the legislature. We've put in both our operating budget and our CIP and our repair and maintenance budgets. And we're very appreciative. We were funded on the operating side, and definitely a support for public education is there. So we're very grateful for that. We're grateful to the governor for his support also. I think that as we move forward, should we need to adjust, we'll work together with the legislature. We can only what's happening now, and so we're ready. We're moving forward. Should changes happen, then we'll need to adjust and work together with our legislature and the governor's office to be sure that we can make the appropriate adjustments.
When we've spoken to the governor on this issue in the past, one of the things that he highlighted was his concerns for students who do have special needs, that a lot of the services that they receive are federally funded and are quite expensive. Do you think that, and a lot of what we're asking is hypothetical, right? So we don't know what's coming. But based on what you're seeing with this FedWatch team, what are your concerns for students who have special needs and require and receive these services?
Right. Addressing the needs of our special needs students is very important. It's very critical to be sure that we're able to implement the IPs, and provide those services to ensure that our students are successful. It always has been critical and is important, and it will continue to be. We will do whatever we need to do within the department if should change happen, to plan accordingly and adjust and be able to implement that to be sure that we meet the needs not only of our special needs students, but our EL students, our students who economically disadvantaged backgrounds. We have a variety of needs within the department, and it's really important that we take care of everyone.
I want to ask you about teachers, and we're going to talk to someone from HSTA after this. But with regards to just staffing, the staffing needs of the department, and understanding there is, this talk of what could happen from DC that could trickle down and impact students here and the education system. Has there been any issues or pushback from teachers in terms of their own concerns of what could potentially happen to their positions? Does it make it difficult to fill some of these vacancies because of this uncertainty as well?
I think our teachers definitely are at the heart of education, right? In the classroom, supporting students day in and day out. And we have had some concerns that have been addressed with principals that have come up to our office. And we've been in communication. I think it's important that we focus on educating our students, that our staff and our teachers in the department know that we're looking out for them. People is so important, right? And we want to be able to take care of them. The focus right now is on ensuring that our students have the proper instruction, that we're providing wraparound services, and that they feel that sense of belonging in school, and so that they can be successful. When we look at our traditionally at the start of every year, the department has had some difficulty in hiring teachers and getting our positions filled, as across the country, right? But this year, we've had a 99% fill rate starting the school year. 99% of our positions are filled, and that was with I believe, a 43% increase in the number of teachers in schools. So we started the year that way. We want to be sure we end strong. We want to continue that effort because having a caring teacher in every classroom that's effective in supporting our students is so important.
That does sound like a remarkably high rate. So what is your vacancy rate right now, especially when I'm thinking about other departments? We have Chief Logan on here quite often, and he's stuck at that, 30% vacancy. The city overall, most of those departments are stuck at a very high vacancy rate. What is your vacancy rate right now?
I can get back to you on that, on the vacancy rate. I do know, though, that we started out strong. There are times when, folks come into the department and they start off as teachers, and they might decide to go into other professions. We've found that I think about the 5-year mark is critical for us. If we can keep folks on and retain for 5 years, the potential for them to stay with the department, they stay with us longer. So those 5 years are critical. I don't know the exact number right now, but I can definitely get back to you on that.
I want to also just get a quick update on what's happening in Maui. And we know that with the devastating wildfires there, a number of schools had to shut down, and they were forced to relocate, and the whole department and schools in Maui has had to accommodate and adjust. Can you give us an update on how things are going, the rebuilding process? How have students who have been displaced and have to move, how have they been adjusting to these new environments?
Well, when after the the devastating wildfires, it was really important for the department that we work with our partners, Department of Health and Accounting and General Services, to get our schools open as quickly as possible. 'Cause being in person in school was the most important thing, and research has shown that's critical for student academic and social emotional recovery. So that was a focus. So we got our schools back up. We have a temporary site in Kapolua and Pulelehua open, and so we are continuing to focus on the needs of our students. Students are struggling, though. Families are struggling, and so we want to be sure that we can have supports in place to help to support them the best possible way. The department has moved forward in we're building employee housing between Lahaina Luna High School and Princess Nahiena Elementary. I believe it's 40 somewhat units or 60 somewhat units. Anyway, but it's employee housing, and that's to help stabilize our employees. That when we did the survey, it was critical. Our employees told us that if we could help with housing, that was important. And I know there are statewide efforts for employee housing, which is terrific, and very much needed. But for Lahaina itself, if we could get our teachers, our staff into housing, permanent housing situations, that would help them. So we are starting that there, supporting our students and our employees in the best possible way. I think is really important.
Yeah, and when you say that students and families are struggling, what do you see as the root of that struggle? Is it the housing issue? Is it mental health? Where do you see as sort of the biggest need?
I think it might be all of the above. Uncertainty, stability for our students and their families. I know some students were displaced. And so I think one of the positive things that that happened was that though that all of Maui and our state helped to support our students who were displaced. Whether it was in central Maui or upcountry, students had to move. Our other schools, readily accepted them, and we really helped to support our kids. Some of our families are moving back into Lahaina, which is great too. Out in Pulelehua, when I go and I visit the schools, and I see the students, outside running around with friends, going to the classrooms. Teachers are really working hard with our students. The counselors, administrators, there's celebrations that are going on. Whatever they're in school that they can celebrate, really providing those opportunities for our students to really enjoy coming back to school. And so, but still, there are challenges, right? And so, we want to be sure that we continue the support for all of our communities there.
We don't have much time, but I did want to ask you this question about a bill that recently did not make it through the legislative process regarding the use of cell phones in schools. We've seen other states take a firm stance on this. Where does the department stand on this? Do you foresee this as being something and a policy and banning cell phones in schools that could take effect? Obviously not this year, but in the future.
Very important topic, I think, on the minds of a lot of people. For the department, what we've done is we've put out several surveys. I think it's important to survey our administrators, our parents, our students, getting information and input back from them. Based on that information, and outreach to community, we'll be making our decisions. And because I think it's important that we hear what community has to say and get that input. But definitely moving forward, we're taking all of that into consideration and working together with the Board of Education to be sure that we address that.
Yeah, and how soon do you think that could happen?
I'm hoping within this next year.
Oh.
Yeah, we're by next school year we'll be working on it. When I say this year, I mean like going into the next school year, we'll have something done. Yeah, it's important. Cell phone usage, I think, has changed even more recently. Students have access to the cameras and all kinds of things. And while some students use that for school, to take pictures of assignments and so forth, others, may use it in ways that may cause some situations of anxiety at school. So we got to take all that into consideration.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you so much. Superintendent Keith Hayashi, always so much to talk about. We appreciate you being here today and joining our conversation.
Well, thank you very much for your support.
Okay. Coming up after this, we're going to be talking to folks from the Hawaii State Teachers Association. You're watching Spotlight Now. Stay with us.
Welcome back to Spotlight Now here on Hawaii News Now. We're continuing on in our discussions regarding the Department of Education as well as education as a whole. And again, we want to encourage all of you watching to engage by entering your questions and comments on Facebook.
Yeah, and we wanted to get a look from all angles of the education system. So we've invited Logan Okita, who is the vice president of HSTA, which of course is the Hawaii State Teachers Association. She's also an elementary school teacher at Nimitz Elementary. Thank you for being here.
No, thank you for having me.
So I'm interested to just get your take on some of what we talked about with the superintendent. I think some of the questions are similar, but getting it from a teacher's lens. What are your thoughts on what's happening at the federal level right now? How are you watching it? I mean, the superintendent shared that he had the Fed Watch. Did the teachers have also like a Fed Watch team?
So we have our version at HSTA. All of the HSTA officers and staff and management at HSTA closely monitor what's happening, and thankfully we have a partnership with our parent organization, the National Education Association, and so they are boots on the ground in Washington, D.C., and so we're able to work with them and our counterparts throughout the country to find out what's happening and how executive orders are impacting everybody.
When you hear of some of these executive orders and what could potentially be coming down the pipeline, as a teacher yourself, what concerns you the most?
I'm worried the most about how a lack of regulation from the federal level will impact classrooms and students throughout the country. We won't have someone being able to explain what the purpose of a program was or what the ultimate goal is in how we follow policy and how we make sure every student gets what they deserve and have access to things that even the playing field for everybody.
I think that people who are not in education kind of think of the Department of Education as basically the bank that distributes all the money. But how does the Department of Education, the federal Department of Education, really support teachers and school systems?
So they are a bank for us. They provide some of the funding for our schools. We definitely rely more on state funding than federal funding, but the federal Department of Education provides us with experts who help to keep up with the research and help us understand what is best practice and how policies impact our students and how we need to adjust instruction to meet their needs.
Has there been any changes that have already occurred during this time and things that you have noticed within, on the ground as a teacher, but also working for HSCA that have had to, adjustments that have had to be made because of this new administration?
I think nothing's made it so that we have to. There are teachers now who are a little more fearful about what types of books they're reading or how they're framing a topic that they're covering. But for the most part, we're not seeing those impacts yet directly on the ground. We all are monitoring, and I think every teacher's aware of what's happening, but we're not all sure how it's going to really impact us yet.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of uncertainty is pretty tough. And as an individual having to kind of make a lesson plan and look over your shoulder, I mean, it just seems like a very difficult environment to teach in.
It's definitely raises some alarms and makes you think twice about maybe even the shirt you wear to school some days, just because of how a message might be interpreted by the member of the public.
When you're having these conversations with other teachers, I mean, what are some of the things that you're hearing most commonly, the concerns? Is it similar to what you said, or are there other things that maybe the teachers are seeing from their perspective that maybe the general public or parents may not really realize?
So teachers are worried really about their positions and about positions at the school, because they know that in the past when we've had budget cuts, the first thing to go sometimes can be a position. And so immediately teachers are fearful that we're not going to have the staff we need to support our students, and we're going to have larger class sizes because we might need to cut classroom teachers.
Mm-hmm. And this could come at a time when the superintendent was just touting all of these gains that have been made since COVID. I'm curious to see to hear what your perspective is on how students are actually doing. You've been a teacher for 18 years. How have you seen, how are we doing? Have we made those gains back that we lost during COVID?
So I get to see student achievement from a really unique lens at my school. I provide reading intervention support throughout our school, and I've been able to see so many of our students make gains to close that gap on their foundational reading skills, which then helps them in every area of their education.
Yeah, and so how do you think we're doing?
I think we're getting there, and I think that if we can maintain what we have, we are on the right path, and we can make back what we need to for the entire child, because it's not just their academics that have been impacted. It's their social skills, it's their emotional well-being.
One of the other things that we've heard in the past in doing these shows and talking to teachers is just the overall resources that are made available. And it always seems like teachers need more. So when you're talking about cuts, obviously resources is something that could also get cuts. And we've heard stories of teachers who go out of their own way to pay for things out of their own pocket and paycheck to support for students. With those types of concerns, I mean, where do things stand with resources, with teachers? And is this a concern at all for you and the teachers?
I know some schools have already announced that they're going to be cutting back on maybe what certain classrooms are allotted in terms of money to buy supplies for next school year, just to be prepared for what may come. And teachers already pull so much out of their pockets for basic supplies because our schools already aren't fully funded. And so if the funding goes down even more, teachers will reach into their pockets, but our pockets are only so deep, and our own families need our support also.
Yeah, and I mean, for many, many years when we have been talking to your organization, a lot of the concern was about teacher shortages. And if you make a tough job even tougher, then you worry that people leave the profession. What are those conversations like?
There is definitely concern already about retaining teachers. We have so many high quality folks in our classrooms and in our system that could easily go to another profession and take all of this knowledge that they have and put it into use in a different way. So that retention issue right now is a concern, but even more so is the recruitment. If our students now don't see that educators are respected, they're not going to want to become educators, and we need our students now to want to be the teachers of the future.
And how do you as a educator yourself, how do you sell this occupation, what you're doing? Because you do hear about it, and it sounds like there is a lot that you're having to deal with. How do you encourage people in your industry and those who may be watching or, looking into this profession? I mean, how do you sell this and try to get more teachers to be part of this education system?
I sell education on the return on investment. So everything I pour into my students every day, from when I was a classroom teacher to now in what I do with reading intervention, I see back in the students every day in their growth, and when they get excited about learning, or they get excited about reading something new, or being able to do something on their own. And now I've been a teacher long enough that I'm seeing my kindergarten students as adults. I'm seeing them become parents, and seeing them grow up to be good humans and good adults who are giving back to our community is that return that no other job can give you.
Oh, that's so wonderfully said. Yeah. Love to hear your thoughts on the cell phone conversation that is happening. We know that in Hawaii, it differs basically campus to campus, really. And I would hope that elementary students aren't bringing their cell phones to classroom, but you can tell me otherwise. Does your organization advocate for a blanket policy across the state? Where are you guys standing on this right now?
So HSTA doesn't have a position on the cell phone policy. We actually just debated this as an item at our annual convention, and our delegates were split all across the board on how they felt about cell phones being accessible, cell phones being used, cell phones being tools for education, and we had every possible opinion about it. Elementary students do have it. I know kindergarteners who have Apple Watches. For the most part, elementary kids will put away their cell phone when the teacher says, hey, I need you to put that away. But they are in the hands of every student these days.
And so when you're having that conversation, as you said, that was had all these different types of opinions. I mean, when things like that come up and positions beyond cell phones usage or any other policy change that might need to happen, how do you folks navigate that? Because there are so many different opinions and what people believe. And how do you find some commonality in that?
So we're constantly asking our members what they think. We've even included it in a question of the week in our weekly email to get their feedback and get their responses. And we're encouraging folks to participate in the department's survey that's happening right now, so that they can put give their input into that survey, so that when the Department of Education considers all of the stakeholders, they have their voice heard too.
Yeah, I'm sure there's no shortage of opinions on that one. Curious also to ask about the Hawaiian language immersion schools and some of the concerns you may be hearing from teachers there, given that these are public education spaces, but they might not align with the priorities of this particular administration.
We actually recently held a town hall with Congresswoman Tokuda, and we had a teacher from a Kaiapuni school ask what happens to Kaiapuni, what happens to immersion, what happens to Olelo Hawaii with these policies that take away DEI, that make Olelo Hawaii back into something that's taboo. And I think as an organization, we're not gonna let that happen. We support our Kaiapuni teachers. We believe in the power of Olelo Hawaii and understanding the place we live in and honoring the people who made this place what it is, and we're gonna continue to support them. But it is definitely top of mind when diversity is discussed.
I want to ask you about the effects of COVID. It has been obviously some time since we were locked down, and education was viewed very differently as it was and currently is now during this time and this hybrid models that we saw. With that, there has been some concern over the development of students during this time and what we're seeing, the long-term effects of what COVID has done from just a learning aspect and the maturity of these these students. What have you been seeing in terms of the effect now that we are a few years removed? Have you seen those impacts, and how are teachers maybe trying to make up for that time?
I think teachers have quickly adjusted to the academic impacts. We know how to differentiate for our students. We know how to meet them where they are and help them get to where we want them to be. What we're seeing also, though, are those social and emotional impacts that there's a desire from some students for that immediate gratification or immediate response, and having to relearn some of those basic life skills that we may have missed in those early developmental years is happening statewide.
Wow. We're almost out of time, but I do want to get your thoughts on just sort of where you think education is right now. We are going into summer. What are the best ways that the community, whether you have kids or not, can support teachers?
I think that the best way anybody in the community can support teachers is to speak up and to share your story about how a teacher impacted your life. Reach out to that teacher and say, hey, I don't know if you remember me, but, and tell them where you are now, because that fills us up. But it's also using your voice to make sure that all of the people who make the policies know what our community wants, and being able to say, we want our teachers to have their voice and make the decisions they know is right for students. And if you're a business leader and you can reach out to your local school and ask them what they may need in order to be prepared for the next school year, that would be amazing, so that we are able to feel like we're ready.
Okay. Logan Okita, thank you so much for being here today. It was a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you so much.
We're going to be checking in with the Chancellor of Honolulu Community College after the break. Stay with us.
From the moment you wake up.
Hawaii News Now brings you the stories that impact your day.
With more on the breaking news, we go live to Casey Lund.
Ready with the push alert? I'm going live. We have an update to the breaking news we brought you this morning on Sunrise.
Okay, guys, as soon as this wraps, toss to Mahia.
And we've been covering this story all day.
Now we go live to Mahia for a new development.
Stand by for breaking news. They just captured the suspect.
That's confirmed?
Yes, sources just confirmed it.
The news you need the moment it breaks.
Here on Hawaii News Now.
First alert traffic is like always having a helpful passenger right next to you.
There's a crash up ahead in the left lane.
When we see a backup, we'll tell you live on TV.
That doesn't look too good.
And send an alert to your phone.
I'll type, you drive.
First alert traffic on TV, streaming, and on the Hawaii News Now app.
keeping you and your ohana safe.
Spotlight Now with Yunji Denise and Ryan Kalei Suchi. Connecting you with newsmakers from throughout our islands. Going in depth with Hawaii's leaders. And taking your questions live. Spotlight Now, where Hawaii comes to talk.
Well, thanks for tuning in here to Spotlight Now. We continue on.
The Department of Education, the public school system, K through 12, broadly with the superintendent. Then we talked about elementary school and also just getting the perspective of the teachers. When you think about the community college system, interested to know the Department of Education and how that impacts your organization and organizations like yours.
Yeah, so in higher education, the Department of Education is actually pretty important in a few ways. Number one, we receive several federal grants, both for the student support side as well as research, if we have it at the community colleges. And UH Manoa, West Oahu, and Hilo also receive federal grants for research. Also, federal aid for tuition and educational costs is huge for us, and that provides access for students who wouldn't be able to attend college or university otherwise.
Do you think that some of these proposed cuts and all that could be happening could affect a community college even more? I just think that when you look at your level of where things are happening, the resources that are with the community colleges, the type of students that attend there, is there any concern that the impact might be felt greater when it comes to your line of work and the students that you directly work with?
Absolutely. I mean, we don't know yet what the impact will be, but because we serve low-income students, first-generation students, students who maybe have not felt that college was within reach, the federal government currently provides things like federal financial aid, Pell Grants, loans, that really give them that opportunity to better themselves and to be ready for a career and to be somebody who's going to give back to the community through the workforce. So we are very concerned because many of these students would not have had a chance otherwise. And, you know, I think a lot of people think of college students as those direct from high school, but we have people coming back for a second career who really want to upskill themselves. And so the aid really provides them with this opportunity.
Who are you most concerned about when you look at the landscape of the changes that could be coming down? What populations are you most concerned about?
Yeah, I think most of our concerns really deals with the populations I mentioned, the low-income students, those who are not familiar with higher education because their parents never went to college, those that maybe have gone into a different career and now want to change. They all could be impacted by what's happening.
What about when it comes to the overall the policy and just some of the information that is taught or the curriculum that is taught or programs or classes that are made available, especially for some of these vocational classes? Are there any concerns that some of that may be cut? And what does that do long term to just where we are as a society and in our economy? Because some of these jobs, when you look at the craftsmen, the skilled labor, like they're learning that through these types of opportunities at community colleges. If cuts are made, how could that impact our community as a whole?
That's right. That's a very good question. At Honolulu Community College, we're known for our career and technical education. That's training for jobs, real jobs and career paths. So we are very concerned about that. So far, the federal administration currently, as it is in favor of programs that lead to living wage jobs. Apprenticeship programs have been reaffirmed by this federal administration as well. So we feel positive about that, but the actual impacts should funding lines be cut or pots of money be changed, could have an unintended consequence. So we are monitoring that.
Yeah, and tell us a little bit, just sort of to back up, what kind of an impact this has on an individual's life. Ryan talked about the impact on community, but I'm interested, people who do return to college after, what are their financial outcomes? If this kind of a resource is weakened or goes away, what happens to those kinds of opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, it used to be that a high school diploma was enough to get a living wage job. And now we are seeing over and over again that our students, our communities really need to have something beyond high school, post-secondary education. And that might not be a 4-year Harvard degree. It might be training beyond high school. So that could be with our apprenticeship programs that are non-credit but give a lot of training. It could be with a 2-year program or a certificate, or it could be 4-year and beyond. I think in Hawaii, those who receive a bachelor's degree, their earning potential over a lifetime is over $1 million more than somebody with just a high school diploma. It's almost that for those with a 2-year community college degree too. So we know that having that post-secondary education is really key for our families to make it here in the islands.
What about the recruitment of students themselves to come to the community college? Because I know that is also a big part of and focus of what you folks do at the community college level, is to help educate people out there about new career paths and skills that they could learn through the college. Do you foresee that being impacted at all? And how much of the recruitment aspect continues on, and how are things going with recruiting new students into your college?
Yeah, the outreach is really, really important for our students because many of our students are not those who thought from 4th grade that they're going to go to college. They're not sure what they're going to do. They're not sure the impact of post-secondary education on their lives. So we don't currently foresee that our outreach is going to be impacted by any of these federal cuts, except that we do receive some student support grants from the federal government. And those who are serving in a counseling function, or those who are providing tutoring or other support, that potentially could be cut if the federal grants are cut. And those are really, really important for our students because they might be underprepared coming into community college, but we believe they can do it, so we just need to shore them up with some supports. And that's where some of the federal grant money has gone to.
The superintendent talked about a Fed watch, and Ms. Okita also sort of referenced that the HSTA through their parent organization is really keeping a close eye. How on earth do you plan for something like this?
You can't really plan for it, but our UH president, Wendy Hensel, has been amazing at getting us together as leaders of the various 10 UH campuses weekly as well. So we look to see what some of the executive orders, the impacts that they could have on our colleges. We work with national organizations, both for universities and community colleges as well. We discourse, we talk about it with our partners to make sure that we understand what is coming down.
And how has it been with the new president, Wendy Hensel, as you mentioned? She has had a few months now here on ground and getting to know the different campuses. If you can elaborate a little bit more about your relationship with her, and is there any changes that you've seen since she's taken over and new things that she's implemented?
She is amazing. She has hit the ground running, came to all of our campuses within a couple of months of her arriving here. What I've seen is she's super smart, super communicative, and she reaches out to us constantly. She wants to make sure that we are working well together, transfer pathways, any alignment that we can do. And she has a lawyer background, which helps in times like these, just to help interpret laws and policies and executive orders that are coming down. So she's really been wonderful.
I'm interested also in if you anticipate, because we were focusing a little bit of our conversation with our previous guest about the Hawaiian language component, if you think that some of your course offerings might have to change, or what areas could have to be scaled back if you do experience severe cuts.
So one thing that our president and our administration at the UH system has come down on is that our commitment to Native Hawaiians is paramount to who we are as a University of Hawaii system. It is firmly in our core values and our imperatives in our strategic plan, both at the college or campus level as well as the UH system. Our administration has also decided that Native Hawaiians are not a racial or ethnic category. They're a political entity, and we have a trust relationship with them. And so it's a very special, different type of relationship than a race category. And I think so far that has been affirmed, throughout the state.
I do kind of want to ask you, it may seem somewhat of a random question, but I just always wondered this, so I'm just going to throw it out there.
Sure.
Based on, then this is specifically with your location of your campus. There's a lot of road work going on around there with the rail coming through. How has that impacted just student life, navigating, going to classes? I imagine that it's somewhat difficult because it is literally right in front of your campus. If you can speak to how the campus has been impacted by the rail.
Well, we drive slowly on Dillingham. I walk to Costco. I do not drive across to Costco. Actually, I joke about it, but I've been really pleasantly surprised because our enrollment is up. I really thought that students would not want to come to campus. And we are heavy in career technical education, so we have online classes, but the majority of our home-based students all are in person. And it has not impacted our enrollment, except maybe positively. I think people are just figuring out, to get there a different way. Kokea maybe, or from the back, and arriving a little early. So I've been very, very pleasantly surprised by that.
That is a surprise. I would have had a similar thought.
I know
as
we
you.
have at least 6 more years of this, so
Something you got to just get used to.
Yeah.
Right.
But for folks who are watching, who are hearing what's happening at the federal level and maybe hesitant about joining the community college system, what would you say? Why is this a good use of their time? I mean, you talked about those financial outcomes, and that is a really compelling argument. But what would you say to potential students today?
Regardless of what happens to the U.S. Department of Education, the value remains the same. The value of going to higher education will produce incredible outcomes for families in our islands moving forward. That's not changing, and our core values and commitment to our students will remain the same. Superintendent Hayashi talked about this. I firmly believe this as well. The legislators and the lawmakers have made a commitment to the community colleges. So they fund us at a very healthy level, and we're eternally grateful so that we aren't completely reliant on the federal government for this type of aid for our students. And we will continue our commitment to our students.
And I guess what is one final message that you would have for, say, our U.S. congressional delegation and advocating for why this should not happen, or why making a case for why the community colleges cannot suffer something like this?
For many of our students, this is going to transform their lives. I firmly believe that. It's not just, rhetoric. We've seen it over and over again, people who have totally changed their lives for the better because they've come through our system and because they now are educated in a skill that they wouldn't have had before. And so education really is the path to the future. It's the biggest game changer that anyone can invest in.
Yeah. Well, Karen Lee, thank you so much for being here,
Thank
Chancellor
you.
for Honolulu Community College. We really appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
Stay with us. We'll be right back after this.
From the moment you wake up.
Hawaii News Now brings you the stories that impact your day.
With more on the breaking news, we go live to Casey Lund.
Ready with the push alert? I'm going live. We have an update to the breaking news we brought you this morning on Sunrise.
Okay, guys, as soon as this wraps, toss to Mahia.
And we've been covering this story all day.
Now we go live to Mahia for a new development.
Stand by for breaking news. They just captured the suspect.
That's confirmed?
Yes, sources just confirmed it.
The news you need the moment it breaks.
Here on Hawaii News Now.
Spotlight Now with Yunji Denise and Ryan Kalei Suchi. Connecting you with newsmakers from throughout our islands. Going in depth with Hawaii's leaders. And taking your questions live. Spotlight Now, where Hawaii comes to talk.
Well, great conversation today on education. We heard from all of our guests about how the impacts, how potential impacts of the Trump administration and their proposed cuts to the Department of Education at a federal level could impact our schools and our colleges.
Yeah, and so interesting because it really is a game of trying to figure it out. You know, the fact that the superintendent says that the DOE has a Fed Watch team that meets every week, and you sort of heard that repeated in various forms from all of our guests. Everyone just kind of watching and waiting. The president did sign an executive order to dismantle the Department of Education at the federal level. What that actually means on the ground for Hawaii students is really still to be determined.
Yeah, and you heard from the superintendent of how they are trying their best to navigate through this, also recognizing that the impact could also change curriculum and a number of other things that the Department of Education on the federal level provides support as well as guidance and guidelines for these schools. And so they are trying their best to navigate that. We heard from the teachers, from someone, a representative from the HSTA, who also expressed their concerns of just trying to be a teacher in this day and age is very difficult, and how more cuts could significantly impact our teacher shortages and people who want to get into the occupation of education.
Yeah, and again, you did hear that commitment to Native Hawaiian language, that these are programs that have greatly expanded over the last few years and are now really an important part of the community from, all the way from kindergarten or preschools even all the way through the college systems, a commitment across the board to make sure that those programs stay in place no matter what the federal policies are.
We also got an update about a potential cut that could be coming to the bus services in our public education system. You heard the superintendent make a plea out there for those who may be wanting to become bus drivers themselves, recognizing that next school year they could be looking at some cuts, some routes, and some adjustments that are going to need to be made to get students into school. It is a problem that has plagued the department for some time now, but the Department of Education actually trying to get ahead of this by putting a call out for bus drivers in our community.
Yeah, last year it was just a matter of days or even a week that parents found out that the bus would not be coming to pick up their children. Now the superintendent basically giving parents a heads up starting a few months before the school year even begins so that everybody can make the plans accordingly, but hopefully they can hire more drivers. Next week we're going to be talking to Senate President Ron Kochi and Representative Nadine Nakamura.
Yeah, the Speaker of the House and the Senate President coming in to provide an assessment of how things went this legislative session. Things are wrapping up. There are a few bills that did not make it through, a number of bills that look like they will. We're going to talk about the green fee that is moving forward, the structure of HTA, I should say, and the future of Aloha Stadium. A lot to catch up with lawmakers who had a very busy session. We encourage all of you to continue to stay engaged, ask your questions in Facebook, email us. We always like to hear from you and get you engaged in the conversation.
Yeah, always interesting to hear what you have to say as well. We'll see you next week right here on Spotlight Now.